Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in us the fire of your love.
Amen.
Well, when I was a kid, 5 or 6, depending on if we went before or after my birthday, because my birthday was in August when we vacationed, we went, when we were out in Connecticut, to New York World's Fair. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, I looked it up last night. I mean, it covered a square mile acre, and it had all these exhibits and buildings, and I read that there was like 185,000 admissions per day. And then in the time that it ran, like over 34 million people went to this fair. And I can remember some of the things we did, like there was an animatron of Abraham Lincoln giving a speech. And I can remember that big kind of globe, as you entered. And the Carousel of Progress, GE did a thing, and you'd go from a family, like in the early, before any inventions happened, and then you'd follow them along. It was like a circular theater, and it would take you around, and you'd see the different scenes. I can remember all that stuff. And it was my first ride on It's a Small World.
Wow.
Which fascinated me, because, you had all these little puppet-like creatures that were dressed in their native land, and you would go in this boat, and you'd hear all these little people singing It's a Small World After All in their own languages. It's a little bit of an earworm that gets in your head, but I just remember just being in this boat looking at all these things. But of all the things I remember about New York World's Fair, the thing I remember most is the moment I got lost.
Oh, no.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I don't know what I was paying attention to. Clearly not my parents. But I looked around, and suddenly there wasn't anyone I knew right in my immediate spirit. And I had this moment of panic, but then I saw there was like a guy dressed in a uniform. And so I walked over to him. I guess my parents had taught me, go to people in uniforms if you need help. And as I was walking up to him to tell him I was lost, my sister's godmother, Bonnie, who their family was there with us that day, was walking up to him to tell them she was missing a kid, me. So we had a little happy reunion. And I said, I don't think I was lost real long, but I have never forgot. Never forgot the feeling of dread at being lost, or the feeling of joy that I felt at being found. So it was a scary moment. Like I said, it didn't last long, but of all the things I saw at the World Fair, the thing I remember most is that I got lost then. And it's a pretty big crowd to get lost in. And I thought of that as I was thinking about this passage that we have in the gospel this week. And I don't know, does somebody really leave 99 sheep to go look for one? It's not very practical. Would people do that? I've torn up my house trying to find a set of keys or a gift card or something I know that's there somewhere. Matter of fact, I know I have a Target gift card somewhere that I never spent. That it's probably in some box, when I just straightened up a bunch of stuff and dumped it. But, we look for things. But at some point, we kind of throw in the towel and give up if we can't find it. Unless it's really important. You lose your wallet, you lose your keys. You need to find these things. But in this case, in the stories Jesus told, he talks about people being lost and there being more joy in heaven over one repentant sinner. And so right away that tells us one of the ways we get lost is in our sin. And there's all kinds of ways that we can be lost. We can be lost in thought. We can be geographically lost. We can be lost from the people we're with. A friend of mine posted on Facebook this week she lost her mom at Walmart. I mean, yeah, that's what I did. But, so there's all kinds of ways, lost in thought, lost in wonder. I sit on a beach with a handful of sand and just sift through all the little tiny, tiny shells that are all so different. I just get lost in the wonder of God's creation. The leaves are already starting to change, which makes me a little sad, but just the beauty of the colors coming through. So there's just so many ways that we can be lost. And yet, we have a God who's always seeking us out. There was a story in Christian Century this past month, and it talked about a story that was in the news back in May. There was woman who had gotten lost. She'd gone for a hike in Hawaii, on Maui, left her keys and cell phone or water bottle in the car, just was going to take a short stint in and come back out. But she sat down and rested a minute, got disoriented, and when she turned to go back out, she went deeper in the woods. Now, the official searchers looked for her. This was on May 8th that she got lost. And they looked at her for 72 hours and then decided to suspend their search on May 12th. But there was a band of volunteers who didn't give up looking. And they kept looking, and they kept looking, and her family hired a helicopter. They even killed a boar and examined the contents of its stomach to see if she'd been eaten. I mean, these people were serious about finding this woman. And on day 17 of her ordeal, the volunteer search paid off. The helicopter rescued her. Helicopter spotted her like 7 miles from where she had been. She was injured and dehydrated, but she was alive. And the thing that struck me as they talked about, like, sometimes, official search and rescue, they only have so many dollars and resources. And then at some point they have to say, we can't do this anymore. Or we don't have the manpower or whatever. Same thing when boats get lost at sea. I mean, there's only so long that they'll keep looking, and then they give up. But what was wonderful was these volunteers who just wouldn't quit. She's alive today because a bunch of people said, we're going to keep looking. And how this author concluded this article, she said, for our own well-being, we may need to stop searching sometimes for lost loved ones, but God doesn't stop. We're the emergency responders, but God is like the volunteer search party. He doesn't give up. He said, the guy that was the president of the Mount Hood Search and Rescue Council of Oregon told Outside that if it were up to volunteers, I don't think we'd ever call off a search. And of course, cities have to make decisions, the bottom line, and all that. But when volunteers are motivated, and that's what they are, they want to find these people. And they just give everything they have to do it. And that's the way that God continues to seek us out in our lives. There was another commentary I got sent an email, and this person is Meta Carlson. She's a pastor at Lutheran Bethel in the Twin Cities. And she talked about a book in One Coin Found. Emmy Kegler weaves the parable of the lost coin into a memoir about her own faith story and identity. Emmy taught how much it matters that one of these 3 parables is about an inanimate object, something still and waiting, unable to cry out, I'm here, I'm right here, come and find me, I'm sorry I got lost. Hearing her take on this brief parable has helped me to feel found in the dusty shadows of my life story and the seasons of waiting. There is a God who will keep looking and looking and looking until I am found. And looking not only for me, but for all who are lost and unable to bleat for help or run back home. Hallelujah. And it occurs to me as believers, we're called to be the volunteer search and rescue mission. There are lost souls all around us. Some in our families, in our communities, in our schools, in hospitals, in the soup kitchen, all the places that we spend our lives, there are lost people. And what if we decided as Christians it was our job to be part of search and rescue of lost souls? How might things change? Who might we find ourselves inviting here if we want to help some folks get unlost? Because I can't think of a better way to be unlost than to connect with God. And there's just so many people out there that still really don't know God. Or the experiences they've had of God have been harmful. Because the church, in its imperfection, has hurt a lot of people through the centuries. We don't mean to. But I know I've been more hurt in the church than out of the church. Because we let our guard down, we expect the church to be a perfect place. But it's not, because we're in it. And we're broken and sinful. And my mom always said, the church is a hospital for sinners. But it's also a search and rescue outpost. What if we left this place this week and went out thinking, who is lost out there? They could really benefit from a warm and loving community that we could invite them in. What if we walked through the world thinking, I'm on a search and rescue mission? And of course, not everybody wants to be rescued, and not everybody knows they're lost, so we don't want to be obnoxious about it. But a simple, hey, I'm praying for you, or I have a great community, would you be interested in coming sometime? Little seeds sown. Never underestimate the power of a seed. That's what we're called to do. Sow seeds, share the good news, look for the lost, and be grateful that we have a God that never, ever stops looking for us. I'll tell you, that day that my sister's godmother walked up to that guard at New York World's Fair, hands down, one of the happiest moments of my life. Because there was something just terrifying to be in a sea of people and not see anyone you knew. And no way, this was before cell phones, and I didn't have a bell around my neck. I mean, there was no way that I couldn't even cry out for. I just was like looking at all the sea of faces. And yet God helped me get reconnected to my people. And He got me unlost pretty quick, which I'm grateful for. That's the God that's still seeking each of us. And if you're feeling lost in any way, don't be afraid to cry out. It's easier to find people if they're crying out for help than if they're not. But then we have that lost coin. Even if you can't cry out for help, God is still on the search and rescue mission. Amen.